Hi, Desirae. So I hope you are having a great week. And I know we've been kind of talking a little bit about trying to reacclimate sort of into a good practice habit that's sustainable during the week, even with everything going on. So we're going to kind of keep that mindset going into, well, it's gosh, what day is it? Thursday? Oh my goodness, it's Thursday. So kind of going into the rest of the week and the weekend and early next week. We're going to keep that mentality of just trying to do whatever you're able to do given your schedule and other things that are going on. We're trying to get as many days as possible of practice in, but be realistic about that as well. If you have a day where there's just a lot of things happening and you don't get time to practice, that's okay. We're just going to do the best we can with what we have because there's a lot of other things happening too. So with that said, let's start with our theory. Our transposing is looking really good. Exercise number 2 that we were doing for this week looks great. So we did a really nice job there. What we're going to do for next time is go right on to the following page, page 55. So we're going to continue getting some practice with this idea of transposing, which is just taking a melody or a song and moving it from one key into another key. The melody will still sound exactly the same. It'll just feel a little bit higher or lower than it was to start. So on page 55, we have 2 different exercises here. So the first one is taking a song in the key of A minor, okay, and then we're transposing it to C minor. So a couple things to make a note of here with this. We do have something going on for both the right and the left hand on these examples on this page. So you're going to now have stuff to keep track of, for bass clef and for treble clef. But they are both in the same key, obviously. So they're working together in one key to create this little song here. It's only 4 measures long for this example, and you're in 4/4 time. So again, that idea of how we're thinking about the process of moving something from one key to another stays exactly the same. However, we don't have key signatures going on yet, which means we need to be thinking about what are the 5 notes in what they're asking for, which we're transposing to the C minor 5-finger pattern. Or we could also think of that as C minor position, or the C minor pentascale notes, or the first 5 notes of C minor, right? They're all talking about the same thing here. However is easiest for you to think about that, go with that. So because we are going from A minor to C minor, we have to figure out what are the notes that we're using in the C minor 5-finger position, right? So if you were to do a C minor pentascale, those are the 5 notes we're going to be using. And we kind of did this a little bit on the previous examples, right? We were figuring out, okay, what are the 5 notes that we need to be using here? And let's make sure that we kind of have those in the back of our head as we're going on to look at the interval transposing, right? So what you'll want to do first is write out, okay, what are my 5 notes for the A minor pentascale, which is the example that they give you at the top, right? So this is using the first 5 notes of A minor, and you can even just kind of glance over the melody and see what they give you and work it out from there. And then we're going to C minor. So then we want to write out, well, what are my first 5 notes in C minor? So a couple ways you can go about that. If you're going, oh gosh, I just totally don't remember, that's totally fine. So what we can do is we can either start with C major, right? So figure out what are my 5 notes for a C major pentascale, and then all we have to do is lower the 3rd note of the scale by a 1/2 step, right? Or we can, to be fair, you could always Google it. That's a pretty good way to check yourself if you're not sure if you've got the right information. Or you can also just try playing through what that would sound like, because by this point we've got a pretty good idea of what makes a major sound, what makes a minor sound, whether or not it sounds correct. That's a really good way to kind of check and see if you're in the right place too, just trusting what your ear will remember. So to give you a way to double check that, again, you're going to start with C as your first note, right? And then if I was to go up for C major, I would just have all those 5 white keys, right? So then if I find the 3rd key, that would be my E, right? To go from C major to C minor, all I have to do is lower that by a half step, okay? So that'll give you all the 5 notes that you'll be using. And then remember, you're just focusing on the relationship of the intervals here. They give you your starting note for the transposition into C minor. So both hands, right? You have your first note for the measure there, and for left hand, you get the entire measure because it's a whole note, so that's kind of handy. But then you're just paying attention to how are my notes moving here, right? Because in the original melody, if my notes are going to be skipping up, then I want to make sure I'm skipping up in the new key as well. And if I'm stepping down, I want to be also stepping down in the new key, right? Because again, we want the melody to sound the same and do the same things, we just are putting it in a new place. So that's exercise number 3. Number 4 is doing the exact same thing. It's just that we're using 2 different keys here. So number 4, the example that they give us this time starts in the G major pentascale pattern, and we're transposing to the F major pentascale pattern. So again, you want to kind of identify, okay, what are my 5 notes in the F pentascale pattern? And that one I think you'll be totally good to work out on your own. And you also have technique pages if you're getting stuck or you just need to remind yourself, what are my 5 notes for the F pentascale pattern? And of course, then also there's the internet too. So however you want to check that, make sure you are remembering which notes you're going to need to be using here, and then just following along by interval as well. Okay, so we will give that a try for this week. So far, our transposing is looking great. So again, try and look at it as just getting a little bit of extra practice. And then if anything kind of trips you up or is a little bit tricky, we can go over that together next week. So let's go on to our Hanon. Oh, I left that book down. Okay, so Hanon, you already put coming down hands together. That's fantastic. So the whole thing is looking really, really solid. And we're making good progress on those transition points. I know these are particularly tricky transition spots when we're switching from going up to going down and then finishing it up at the end. Your transitions are looking great though, so really nice progress there. We've already got the whole thing hands together. So the main focus for this week with our Hanon is going to be continuing to get a little bit smoother on those transition spots. We're making great progress. Like I said, we just are wanting to get that feeling a little bit more comfortable, a little more consistently smooth, and we'll be in great shape. And then the other thing to kind of keep in mind, this isn't really something to like work on, just as something to have in mind as you're working on this, would be to, before you actually start playing the exercise, make sure that where you're sitting on the bench in relationship to the piano puts you at a comfortable distance so that you can reach all the way to the low end and all the way to the high end wherever you are needing to start and stop the exercise without actually having to physically scoot from left to right, okay, or vice versa, right? So we want to try and position yourself in a place where you can comfortably reach both extremes that you'll need to be using when you play the whole exercise without having to actually physically move your seat, right? So that's kind of a little technical thing. Just like I said, just have that in your head before you get started and you will be totally good to go. All right, so for Over the Rainbow, making good progress on this. I think we'll wait until you're here in person before we go over a new section for this. So for this week, we're still gonna stick with just those first 4 measures. And we're gonna try something a little bit new. Your chords look great in the left hand, so we've done a really nice job there. What I think we'll try this week is we're going to shift gears just a little bit. So we're going to step away from the chords for a little bit here, and we're going to start putting hands together, but we're gonna just have the melody in the right hand with the bass notes in the left hand. So left hand is gonna get easier, okay? That means that if we're starting, we are starting in our first measure, we have the chords C and then A minor. So your left hand is just going to need to play the roots there. Your left hand would play a C for the C chord and an A for the A minor chord. Okay, and that's all you're going to do. So when you get to E minor, you'll play E. When you get to the C7, you just have to plunk out another C again. It's only just the roots or the letter that we're building the chord on top of, okay? So we'll try and kind of put that together. Now with this, in order to keep your hand from having to move like a ton, your left hand, what if we try starting with the 5th finger on C? so that way when you start, you'll start with 5 on C, and then when you get to the A minor chord, you just have to shift your thumb up by 1 to reach the A, and then the rest of the time your left hand just gets to stay in one happy little spot. It doesn't have to move at all. You don't have to be moving back and forth or shifting around. It's just needing to scoot your thumb up by 1 to reach the A, and then you can be in the same spot the rest of the time. So that will hopefully help with putting that together as well, because then you can kind of focus a little more on your right hand, because your right hand obviously still has to move around a little bit for the melody here. So what you kind of end up with is something like this, where you have, well, I'm like way in the wrong spot. Okay, where you have C's together. So I've got my left hand pinky on C, and then I'm going to shift my left hand thumb up to A while my right hand takes the melody. Now my left hand will play E for the E minor chord, C for the C7, F for the F chord, and I just stay here on the F, even though we have several different F chords here, and then back to the E for E minor, okay? So that's kind of what you're gonna end up with, but like I said, we're just gonna kind of start getting used to doing that with both hands together. We're focusing on a couple of different things here for this, and then we'll go on in the song together next week. And then for King William's March, we are looking good here. So we just like powered right through that second line with all of the ornamentation and everything. We're looking very good there. I think we want to make sure on measures, oh yeah, it was here. So measures 4 and measure 7 for left hand. Remember, your left hand does actually have an F sharp in those measures. It looks like we're playing an F natural in the recording that you sent me. So we may be getting that sometimes at home, and then the recording may have been just a fluke. Just want to remind you that you will actually have F sharps in those measures. So if you need to write that in or draw in the sharp sign to remind you, or circle it, or write F sharp, or whatever you feel like, if you want to highlight it, I mean, whatever works for you. But something to kind of refocus your attention to that particular note to kind of help you remember, oh right, that's not just a regular F, that's going to be the F sharp there. And then when we get to measures 7 and 8, this is where the right hand kind of gets a little on the fancy side, right? When we get to our trill, remember your trill will also start on the F sharp. The trill will start on the note above the printed note, and that's, again, what they're kind of explaining to you here, right? So what's interesting is measure 7, we actually end on an F sharp, right? And then when we get to here, we're going to still be starting this trill on an F sharp, which means you'll actually have 2 F sharps in a row, okay? So when we have this measure, we play la 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 la, end on the F sharp, and then we play another F sharp, da 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 for the Ds. So what that ends up sounding like, if I do measures 7 and 8 here, let's see, here I am. Okay, so if I do 1 and 2 and 3, G, F sharp again for the trill, and then I end on my DD there at the end, okay? So again, that's 1 and 2 and 3, G, F sharp again, and then I end my last 2 notes, okay? So that's the only little adjustment I think we need to make there. Everything else looks great. So I think what we'll do for this week is we will see if we go back to just a little bit of right hand by itself, we gotta start getting this guy a little comfortable going faster. So what we're gonna do, because right now we're pretty comfortable at about quarter note set to 60, okay? We're gonna, oh, that's the wrong thing. That's not my metronome. There's my metronome. Okay, we're gonna see if we can get this up to 80, okay? But it'll just be the right hand. You don't have to worry about doing this hands together yet. If we're making big adjustments to tempo, it's a lot easier to just focus on, in this case, the much more challenging hand, right? Before we try it with both. So if we set the metronome to 80 and we try the right hand, it sounds something like this. So that's kind of what it feels like at 80. And this is still probably a little bit slower than where we'll want it overall, but again, we're not going to try and jump all the way up to our finished tempo just out of nowhere, right? It helps if we can kind of ease our way in, and then it's going to not only feel easier, but it's going to make sure that we keep all of our notes and our fingering and our rhythm and everything exactly the way that we want them, right? So let's see if we can try out just a little bit of the right hand this week. If you want to do just the first line, that's fine. The second line, you know, it starts the same as the first line, and then we get into the more adventurous portion that we already went over with the trill and everything. So if you'd prefer to just leave that part alone and keep working on it a little bit slower, that's totally okay. If you want to try it out at the faster speed and see what happens, that's completely fine too. But try it out with the metronome at 80 and just kind of see how it goes this week, okay? Because we got to start getting a little bit more of that comfort build up, right? It's one thing to be able to just kind of play it faster than you normally would, but it's a totally different thing to get that feeling good in your fingers, right? So that you're not like panicking each time you try and do it fast, right? We want it to feel normal and comfortable at that tempo, all right? So we'll give that a try this week. Make sure we get those F sharps in the left hand and the 2 F sharp, lots of F sharps to be looking for here, and the 2 F sharps in a row for the right hand when you go from measure 7 to measure 8, right? And I think that's pretty much it. So again, very nice job. I know we're kind of short on a lot of practice time here, so you're doing really, really good with what you are able to do, and just keep that mindset going into the rest of the week, okay? Alrighty, well, have a great rest of your week and your weekend, and I will see you next time.